Hey, and welcome to Retro Reprise Live Friday night. It's going to be awesome. I hope you guys had a great week, and I hope you have an even better and more awesome weekend. I had sort of a crazy week this week. I had a schedule change, and everything that I did shifted up 4 hours. So that's why I'm doing the podcast now instead of Thursday night at midnight, in case you may have been wondering. So, tonight's topic, we're going to talk about a couple of things. I think our second item is going to take up most of the night, but the first item that I wanted to talk about was the Retron 77 pre-order. It's finally getting closer. So, if you're not familiar with the Retron 77, it's a new console that's coming up from Hyperkins that is going to play Atari 2600 games in HD. Now, they originally introduced this back at CES 2017, and I was really interested in it about that time. But what ended up happening is they didn't really do anything with it, so we didn't hear hide nor hair of it for about a year. And then at CES 2018, they started talking about their Ultra Game Boy, and they were pushing that. And they didn't really talk about the Retron 77, but if you looked in pictures, they did take it to CES 2018. So, I was just kind of wondering what was going on with it. Well, we finally have something. I'm sorry, my voice keeps on getting hoarse on me here. So, we finally have something, and I thought I would show you guys what we have here. Let me get rid of that. And so, if you were on Facebook on Easter Fool's Day, April 1st, you saw this on your Facebook page. This is not a joke, the Retron 77. And this does look kind of cool. But it was asking you to sign up for the pre-order, and the print's a little small for me to read there. But yeah, you could pre-order, or you could what I thought was you could go and pre-order the Retron 77. But what it turns out it was actually for a mailing list. So if you clicked on that link, then you would get this. You would get the mailing list for the Retron 77. As far as I know, it's still available. So you can go and check that out. I do want to go back here for a second and take a look at the design. I really find the design interesting. I actually think it's a bit better looking than the Atari box. The Atari box is or I guess the VCS now, is trying to go very modern, while this is going in the opposite direction. They still got that Hyperkins cutoff corner that they like to do so much, and but the controller I find really interesting because it is sort of a blend between your standard Atari controller, but then they've also got that additional button to the right, so whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you'll be able to play it with this controller. The only problem I have with the controller is that Hyperkins is notorious for making crap controllers. So I don't know if that's going to be a good or bad controller, and you really won't know until you get one in your hands. But I do like the design. There is that reminiscent wood feeling, and there is that, it does kind of look like a ham radio if you really take a look at it. Hey, Papa Yoshi showed up. Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming in. Yoshi, I want to send a shout out to Yoshi and to Ray for helping me test the chat out. And I was testing that out earlier this week, and they popped in and talked to me for a little bit, and I finally got the chat to where it was working. But Yosh, there's like a 30-second delay on YouTube from Twitch. I tested out the audio on both of those, and it's pretty crazy. But getting back to the Retron 77, there's a couple of things that I would like to see come out of this console, and I don't know if they'll happen or not. The first thing is I really do want to see them make this, but it has to output natively 4.3. This cannot be a stretched 16:9 image. I don't want to see that happen to Atari games. That would drive me absolutely up a wall. The other thing that I'd really like to see, and they haven't said anything about it, is whether or not this is going to play Atari 7800 games. Now, the 7800 came out, I want to say, in 85, but the cartridge shape was the same. And so the 7800 was already backwards compatible with the 2600. So you could play 2600 and 7800 games. I don't see a reason why they would not do this, but looking at this controller, I don't think that's going to be the case, because this looks like your standard Atari controller. Even though it does have two buttons, I don't think they're separated buttons. What I'm talking about is on the 2600, the original 2600 controller, it only has the one button. You have your joystick and then you have your button. This does have two buttons, but it looks like that other button will be for left and right-handed. Otherwise, you're going to be playing a really awkward game if you're like having to drive the stick with your thumbs and then try to push the buttons otherwise. So it looks like it's going to be a standard 2600, and that is that is closer to the standard 2600 controller layout. And honestly, it's not my favorite game controller. They really could have made a couple of options, and I really think they should have done a game pad, because you can do something like take a Sega Genesis controller and put it in an Atari, hook it up to an Atari, and it'll work. And the game pads are just more comfortable. You can get a little bit longer gameplay. I remember as a kid working that joystick and just getting, besides sounding really dirty, just like getting cramps in your forearm because you would just be burning off the muscles. But and the other thing with the Retron 77 is it's taken them forever to get to this point to where they're like, oh, hey, go ahead and sign up for pre-orders. I really wanted this when they initially showed it at CES 2017, and it really was not. I was waiting for it and waited for it and waited for it. After about 6 months, I gave up. Eventually, I went to Retropalooza and just picked up an original 2600 and got a bunch of games with it for about $60. So, yeah, that's kind of the thing. But I'm looking forward to this. Some iterations that I'd like to see. Yeah, I'd like to see the 7800 integration. I would have liked to have seen them do something more akin to, say, like a Retron 3 or 5, where they've got multiple consoles built into the system. So I would love to see, the Atari 2600, ColecoVision, and Intellivision, because those were all sort of iconic consoles at the time. And call it something like the Retron Vision or something like that. It would have been. I think that would have been much cooler to do. But this looks like it'll be fun. I think I have more faith in this than I do with the Atari VCS. So that's the Retron 77. Check it out if you guys are wanting to pre-order one. If you're really hyped up about an Atari console to play on your HD set, they're taking pre-orders right now. Or they're not taking pre-orders, they're taking emails. I signed up for the email just because I want to see what it's going to look like and see how much this thing is going to cost. That's the other thing. This thing has to be cost effective. If this thing is over $60, I don't know if it's going to sell well. This can't be a $100 console, especially when you can pick up the original for so much cheaper. Yeah, you can't play it on an HD television, but it's the original, and that's going to be a selling point. But that's the Hyperkin Retron 77. But now we're going to move on to the big stuff here. Give me just a second to get all of this. Oh, nope. There we go. Back to the subjects. So I've had a chance to look over the not so awesome document, and it's long. It's really long. And I don't know if we're going to be able to cover everything tonight. I would like to try to, but I'm not sure. I was going to take notes and bring those notes up. I still have them, but just Obscurus Lupa's complaints for Channel Awesome alone took up 6 pages. Now, the other producers who are contributing to the document, theirs aren't as long, but hers is very long, so I tried to do just the highlights. So I'm going to try to get through these, but address some of the more major issues as we go along. And since we're doing that, I'm going to actually pull up the screen for the actual website. So if you want to check this out, they have the Google Docs, and just look up channel not so awesome. Let me check on that. My chat box is getting in the way. Not so awesome, and it's a Google Docs, and we'll take a look at some of the stuff here. So in the contents, while I pull this up, you can see all of these different contributors to it, and it's a 69-page document. So the people who were contributing to it was Obscurus Lupa, Mars Girl, Holly Brown, who was Channel Awesome admin, and she was sort of the HR chick for the channel. And she's got some interesting stories, and apparently I think she was also kind of sexually harassed at Channel Awesome. Don't quote me on that. Allegedly. I'll say allegedly. Of course, Linkara, Suede, Jesu Utaku, Benzai, Chaos D1, Dr. Gonzo from Nerd to the Third Power, Leon Thomas from Renegade Cut, Sean Fowles from Epic Fail, Beth Elderkin, Sephara, who was, I guess, a wiki contributor, Topher Ames, Fantastic Fool, Ann America, Tom White, and Lindsay Ellis. The nostalgia chick herself also contributed to this document. And when I believe when this started, I think it was about 65 pages, and more stuff's been added to it. So we're going to get to some of the more interesting stuff here. So we're going to clarify some information. And that's what she starts off with. First of all, the content creators were not officially employed by Channel Awesome. It was simply running as an aggregate site. And the way you have to look at it is sort of, it's a very symbiotic relationship. So what Channel Awesome basically did was put together like-minded content creators, and the draw of those content creators was that somebody would maybe be a fan of one and they would stick around and watch another. And the way the website benefited from that was that the website would have ads on the website, and they would make money from the ads, and then the content creators would make their money off of the videos. And because they were like-minded content, people would stick around and watch the other videos. So that was the general idea. The only people that were paid are the people who were the Chicago crew. So the people who are working on Nostalgia Critic, things like that, those are paid actors, and I can't remember the 2 actors that they have for that, but they're paid. And the biggest amount of problems with Channel Awesome is that Mike Machad, the CEO, is very difficult to work with. He's the person who most of these complaints are pointed towards. Now he does. There are some people who do talk about Doug and Rob Walker, but most of the complaints really head up to Mike Machad, and some of them about Mike Ellis. Now Mike Ellis and Bargov are no longer with Channel Awesome, but there were quite a few issues with Mike Ellis, and they eventually had to let him go. So, something to also keep in mind with all of this is that Doug Walker does not own the intellectual property of the Nostalgia Critic. It actually belongs to Mike Machad. So that brings up some interesting things, like what if Doug Walker left? Well, he wouldn't be doing Nostalgia Critic material. That belongs to Mike Machad. And just in turn, if Doug Walker left, Mike could go and find another Nostalgia Critic and have them do the part. So I found that incredibly interesting. It was something that I had sort of heard of right before this had dropped, but getting a little bit of clarification is very interesting. And we're going to move on here. Let's see if I can use my notes a bit more. So one of the major complaints is that some people would speak up against some of the things that were happening, and apparently Machad would be more aggressive towards the women than men. In fact, there were three female producers who were kicked off the site for speaking up against Machad, and there were men who'd done it and still managed to stay on the channel. Channel Awesome was made aware of sexual harassment from former COO of Channel Awesome and did nothing. That would be Mike Ellis. Communications were done through Skype group chats. And I could see where that would be productive to a certain extent, but for the most part, I think especially with a channel or an organization as big as Channel Awesome, you would want to maybe enact email because people are going to be in different time zones. Maybe there's something that you could just throw in there automatically. What I mean is, like, you could send out a mass email, everybody would get it, everybody would read it, you could be on the same page very quickly. But still, I could still see the use of having Skype chats, but apparently that was the only communication. Email was used very, very little from what I understood of this. People were told to talk to Machad, Rob, or Holly. When Holly was fired, it was just those two. Mike was so against being involved or doing anything that he eventually became silent CEO, which meant it was just Rob, who also didn't want the job. Anytime we came to him with complaints, he would call us children behind our backs. So this is just more of like essentially it sounds like no one wanted to deal with managing the producers. And Machad, who I really don't even know if that would be a chief executive officer role to, kind of wrangle the talent. A lot of this sounds like, to be perfectly honest, a lot of this sounds like high school BS. Somebody does a thing and creates something to make it cool, and everybody wants to join, and they let them in, and then they don't want to manage them, and the thing sort of falls apart, and that's what this looks like. I really don't know. Yeah, this should have been someone who was willing to talk with and work with the producers, and he just became a silent CEO. Doug is not considered anything but talent, and is frequently a part of business calls. He also is occasionally part of company decisions. But yeah, I think as far as like Machad and maybe Doug himself, he's more of the Channel Awesome mascot. Yeah, it does, Yosh. This is all very high school for people who are, I don't know. I think some of them were in their mid-20s, when this was going on. They're old enough to know better for a lot of this stuff. Communication was the worst. We've been through that. Here was a good one. Blistered Thumbs producers were never told the site was shutting down. They found out when they saw the announcement on the front page. Several producers were let go without being informed. That was a big one. That the people who were working on Blistered Thumbs, which was more of the game-centric version of the site, it was just kind of tanking apparently, and they had the people who had tried to put it together were working really hard, but nothing was coming from the Channel Awesome side of things, and it just sort of fell apart. And instead of telling the people who were trying to put the website together and get things to work, they just decided to shut it down, and they were told at the same time everybody else was, by going to the website and seeing that it was being pulled down. You're talking about the list of rules. The list of rules were apparently stuff that they had kind of come up with on the fly and were arbitrarily dealt with. Meaning that you didn't have an ability to like look at something and go, okay, well, here's what I can and here's what I can't do. And that's what's sort of funny about this was that at some point in time, they had posted on the website. There's an internal website that the producers got to use, and there was sort of a rules of conduct, or here's some of the rules to follow, and it was always like a coming soon page. It never actually came together. So a lot of these guys who would get in trouble or would piss off, Mashad or somebody else who was actually part of Channel Awesome, a lot of the time they didn't know why. They didn't know why they were being punished, or why their channel was being pulled, or why, what material, why they weren't able to post their video up, or things like that. So there was rules that were, I guess, put into place but never really talked about, or not everyone was informed of them. Earlier content creators never got any of these kind of rules. It was just some of the ones that were starting to come on later on. And I could understand, especially in this kind of model where not everybody knows what's going on. This is sort of a new concept, and you're kind of learning as you go along, but this is where sending out an email or having a central point of communication would have been good to have, and probably would have saved a lot of headaches when you really think about it. Here she's talking about the pop quiz hotshot stuff. This is really interesting from a fan point of view. I never contributed to the Indiegogo crowdfunding thing that they had done. I remember when they were pushing it, but they actually raised $90,000 for it, and this is what got them essentially the studio in Chicago that they filmed the Nostalgia Critic stuff in. But they were going to do 3 shows. They were going to do Pop Quiz Hotshot, Awesome Comics, and Gaming Gauntlet. Now, Pop Quiz Hotshot, I've never watched a full episode, but I've seen clips of it. It's absolutely terrible. They bought that, so a couple of things. One is that they bought that set in Chicago, or they bought essentially a warehouse in Chicago. And they were going to set up the game shows and these other things. And I don't know how they didn't think about this, because this is something I think about all the time, is my sound. And it's a warehouse, and sound echoes off of everything. So they bought the warehouse, but didn't think to have any soundproofing, or at least purchase an area that would already have soundproofing covered, at least some, drywall and some insulation or something. But yeah, apparently they have a warehouse where 90% of it doesn't get used. They shoot the Nostalgia Critic episodes basically in the break room or the front office, but the rest of that studio area doesn't get used. Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation about where the rest of that money went to. a lot of people feel like that probably went to living costs. Just going off of other people's speculation. I try not to speculate or point fingers at things. I more or less just want to cover what's there. But yeah, if you've ever seen Pop Quiz Hot Shot, I was looking over a clip of it a couple days ago. The little kiosk stand where the contestants would stand and it would have their name on it. It was like I've seen high school production sets for plays that were painted better than these things. It was just so sloppily put together. It was really horrible. And apparently with that, this was something that Mike Michaud really wanted, and anybody who was participating in it was pretty much embarrassed about it. They didn't want to release it. So they kind of held on to what they had. They ended up shooting about 12. Well, they had to do reshoots for it because of the soundproofing and the sound issues that they were having. And on top of that, the set just looked awful. So the paint job on, if you go and find the video clips, where the contestants are standing, the paint is just slapped on there like nobody cared. There's green paint going over into a section that should be black. There's black paint going over to where it should be green. It was just, it really looked like nobody gave a crap about anything that was going on. Something else about the game show was that I think it was Holly had to talk them into having prizes. They didn't know, they honestly didn't think that they needed to have prizes for a game show, and they had to be talked into it. Oh yeah, that's what that says right here. They had to be told to have prizes by Holly. I forgot about this part. The Indiegogo rewards were 6 months late. So this also led into something else. By March 15th, a year and a half since the show was promised, after Indiegogo threatens to investigate, Michaud forces Doug and Rob to release the first episode of Pop Quiz Hot Shot, which they are embarrassed about. So yeah, I talked about that a little bit. Yeah, they ended up having to release 12 episodes, and the only reason why they released those 12 episodes was to cover them legally so Indiegogo would get off their butt. And that's it. So who knows what happened with the rest of that money. Yeah, Yosh. The sets do look like a third grader painted it. It does look like this. The sets look like craft day for a preschool. They really did. I mean, and I'm not trying to bag on anybody. I know it's rough to like do these. Oh, did the rewards suck too? Oh, I think that just rewards were pretty much just like, we're gonna do a game show and we might draw somebody from that. I don't remember what they were. Let me know if you remember what the some of the rewards were. Anniversary specials. I think I can sum up a lot of these. Someone who commented on my first video before this came out basically said it was a Clown Shoes production. And yeah, it pretty much sounded like it. So part of the problem with the production, well, there was multiple problems, but some of the big ones... Yum glue. Yeah, pretty much. Some of the problems with the productions, and here's again something that to keep in mind. A lot of these producers who showed up to do these, at first it was sort of fun, and everybody was excited to be there. And yeah, there were problems, but everyone was really excited to do it. Everybody wanted to participate. This was something that they wanted to do. And by the time that they were getting into the later movies, a big part of the problem was the issues that they were running into from those previous productions, they were running into with the current productions as well. And these were things that you should have learned from. And that was a big deal with this, was that they really should have learned from their past mistakes. Let's get through some highlights here. Now, I did have somebody comment on the previous video that getting paid in exposure was something that should be expected by anybody who puts videos out, and we do see it. We do end up seeing a pattern with a couple of things here. So, with this note, they're saying that Channel Awesome paid for lodging and meals when they were during filming hours. It's really worded weird. Otherwise, we were on our own. So you got meals while they were filming, and you had a hotel to stay at. They had to be told to have water on set, and we were not paid for our time, nor did we make any revenue from the DVDs. See, and that's where, to me, that's where some of the big issue comes in at. If they want to do these specials, essentially, they were asking the producers to come in and be actors on this set. Yeah, clown shoe. Get him, Steve Dave. So they didn't really feed him unless they were filming. So there was no per diem or anything. Here's the thing you have to understand. If you are someone who works and travels, you get a thing called per diem. What per diem is essentially is kind of a miniature version of living expenses. This is money to get, if you got to go run out and get McDonald's or get something to drink or kind of petty money to use to spend while you're at that location because you are away from home. And any company that asks or requires people to go and travel, they usually give them some form of per diem. This is common practice. This isn't anything special or new. Many people don't travel for their trips, but normally businesses will cover food and lodging. Here, they didn't really do that. Also, that they just didn't have a basic need like having water on set. When you're doing take after take after take or talking all the time, you need to get something to drink. I've got my half-calf coffee. But yeah, that these guys never saw any of the revenue of the DVDs. Well, we'll get into some more of that because there's something more horrible that comes along. Basically, Mike told them that they were paid an exposure and a free trip with their friends. When they pointed out that exposure didn't mean anything after the first time, we were told that we didn't have to go then. Mike in particular liked to state how great it was that they embedded, not hosted our videos, and never asked for a cut of our revenue. So this is going back to how things operate at Channel Awesome at the time. So the website puts ads up, and the website makes revenue off of those ads. The producers who are putting videos on there have ads that they have control over the role. I used to host videos on, or not host videos, but I used to put videos up on blip.tv. And that's how it works. You could kind of pick where you would have your commercials at. And at a certain point in time, you could add more commercials. So this was something that was common with the website. Now, something that's really interesting was when Mars Girl first joined, she was asked by Mike to give him the video, her videos first, and then he would upload them to Blip. And then they would make the money and then give her cut. And she actually ended up speaking with Linkara when he joined the site. And he said he was just uploading his own videos and giving them the embeds. So, and on top of that, Mars Girl never made back any of the money from the videos. She never got any money from the videos that she actually gave to Mike Mashad. So if all of this is sounding kind of haphazard and crazy, that's because it is. I'm trying to make it a little bit more cohesive, but I don't think I'm doing a very good job. This is the Suburban Nights filming. I think this is the one that's notorious for basically injuring 4 people, and one of them passed out. What was her name? Alyssa. She was taped to a wall and then passed out. Now, something that's not in this document that I found out later on by doing some more research was that she passed out, and what they did was basically give her some Gatorade. So instead of any kind of proper medical care, they gave her Gatorade. Now, during the filming of Suburban Nights, they did have to sign a contract. Now, this contract basically was freeing Channel Awesome up of any kind of liability issues. So if someone got injured, you couldn't go after Channel Awesome. But also included in the contract was that any crossover videos that were filmed during that time. So in your off time, when you're not filming on Suburban Nights, if you decide to do a team-up video with someone else, they were wanting your video so they could make the revenue off of that video to cover the cost of filming the movie. So you have to consider that you've got these producers that are coming out. Yeah, they're paying for their hotel. Yeah, they're sometimes paying for their food. You're talking about long production days, probably 18 hours, something like that. So these guys are busted tired by the time they get back to their hotel, but during these crossover events, they know that traffic's going to be pretty big, and they're going to go team up with other people. And here you have Channel Awesome saying, oh, well, if you do team up with somebody while you're out here doing this, we want your video. By the way, you also have to go home once you film everything and edit it and put it together. So not only the time that you spent out not making your own videos for filming a Channel Awesome anniversary video, but on top of that, you're going in and you're editing your own video that you did with a team-up crossover thing, and then Channel Awesome wants that. So people kind of didn't really want to do that. So one of the big events here that I thought was just really insanely stupid, in my opinion. So let me talk about this. As was done with Kickassia, they only had one camera with Rob at the helm. This is a larger production and with 2 teams. So Lindsay and Ed, and I think that's Ed Glazier that they're talking about, have a closed door meeting with them talking about the walkers to use more than one camera. They borrowed Todd in the Shadow, his camera, and because it was the same model, and they borrowed an SD card from Lupa. Ed was there to play a cloak. He is recruited to cameraman, and Liz, Lewis's guest, is asked to play a cloak. Iron Liz, who I didn't know who Iron Liz was until I saw Suburban Nights. That's not true. I think I saw her on some of Linkara's stuff. She basically took over Ed's place since he was running camera. And while they were filming, she gets her knee bashed in. And since she was Linkara's guest, she didn't sign a contract. So, in a dirtbag kind of move, they're trying to coerce her to sign the contract so they're not liable. And she doesn't want to do it because she's out there filming her stuff with some of the creators too, and she didn't want to give up the material that she was trying to do with these crossover events. So that's really kind of dirty. Let's see. Orlando, the guy who was doing the stunts, landed on his neck wrong. Here's a good one. Allison never received a copy of To Boldly Flee. Neither did many fans who bought them because they messed up the orders and it was never fixed. So I know a lot of people have been a lot of the comments that I've seen on my channel about this whole thing, this whole document, is I've actually had a lot of people come on and go, oh well, they're just jealous because the Nostalgia Critic's so popular. No, there's real mishandlings of how things are happening, and this becomes real apparent with the DVD situation and the Indiegogo campaign where they got $90,000. This is severe mismanagement. This isn't just... And occasionally something goes wrong. Something can go wrong. Things can go bad. It does happen. But a lot of these things really could have been avoided if you just put a little bit of thought into it. And it doesn't seem like that was done. This is back to where it goes into clown shoes again. This is just clown shoes. So, Yoshi, who's in the chat with me, they get a DVD. I think eventually they did a gift card. But yeah, if you were getting a Nostalgia Critic DVD or a Channel Awesome DVD, that's not really much of a prize. They got a bunch of those laying around. But I mean, I guess if you're a real big fan, then that would be a great prize to have. I don't know. This is just more stuff about filming that was just stupid. Scripts coming out very last second. People not even bothering to read them after a while. This one I thought was really interesting. So in the movie, Lindsay, Nostalgia Chick, and Linkara have to do a, we'll just call it an implied rape scene. And both of them were uncomfortable about doing it. And apparently Doug, who had written the script, didn't really understand why they would be uncomfortable doing it. What made it onto the screen eventually was sort of a toned down version of it, but it's still very much implied rape, where she has to make, noises like no, don't. So yeah, a lot of this stuff right through here, this section, is really about just really stupid mistakes with filming. Really, these are filming mistakes that you would make on your first time, and you would make note of this, and you would never do it again. But this, I think, was this is like their third film that they're doing. There's stuff with Phelan. They asked him to film a scene in green screen. He said, well, I can film at green screen at home and then send you the footage. They said no. They were already on their way back to the hotel when Doug went and got him, picked him up so they could go and film that. Yeah, it's just a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of just really bad decisions and not making... If you're spending money, this is a bad way to spend money. This is a lot of screw-ups that could be really fixed. Here she talks about the Spoonie incident, and it's actually nice to get this because I had heard some of the things that I had heard, some of the rumors that were coming out. Now, if you're not familiar with what happened, Spoonie and Lupa got into a thing about a joke that Spoonie had said on Twitter, and at this point in time, this is where Spoonie was really about to crack. This is right before he launched off on his own and just kind of fell off from the face of the earth. But this was sort of like the beginning of it. And anyway, Channel Awesome decides that they're gonna suspend him, and he decides that he's just gonna quit. Now, the rumor that went around was that a couple of women, including Allison, got Spoonie fired, but it turns out that he did quit. And both Spoonie and Lupa went on to Twitter to kind of clarify what was going on. And it was one of those things where they both said, hey, look, Spoonie quit. We didn't get him fired. And no one really believed it. And the thing is that Channel Awesome could have gone out and said, yeah, here's, Spoonie decided to leave. it was his decision alone, and we'll leave it at that. But apparently, since all the speculation was going around, Lupa had received some threats, and I was a little concerned about that. So it would have been, that's one of those things, like, I'm not sure how you would actually get involved with that, or whether you'd want to get involved with that, but that is something that happened. So it would have been nice if someone from Channel Awesome would have clarified and said, okay, well, no one got anybody fired. Spoonie decided to leave on his own, but they did keep tight-lipped about that, and there was a lot of rumors going around. So I remember hearing about, where there's like 2 or 3 women at Channel Awesome, and they decided to get Spoonie canned. But it turns out that wasn't the issue at all. And I've even heard Spoonie himself say, he left on his own, but there was sort of this air about what happened. And Channel Awesome could have cleared that up and decided not to. So here's where things, to me, get a bit more interesting. So the producers, in 2013, the producers get together to put out a list of grievances with Channel Awesome. The communication has been so bad and they can't take it anymore. So this document, this is another thing that I've had comments about my videos on, is that the document that we're looking at now is not something that they just decided to release willy-nilly. This is something that the producers came together on a couple of occasions to try to get Channel Awesome to improve their communication between the producers and Channel Awesome itself. So basically saying that they were divided into groups. They did a series of calls. One of the big complaints was the To Boldly Flee script, which if you remember, or if you don't know, that was where Doug was retiring the Nostalgia Critic. This was a big bomb for the site. This was a big bomb for pretty much everybody at Channel Awesome. But they didn't tell any of the other producers that Doug was retiring the character, or essentially in this script killing him off. And pretty much made it sound like everybody who was a reviewer on Channel Awesome was moving on and doing something else. And as a result of that actually had a lot of people leave. This is another childish, just high school misstep. The To Boldly Flee DVD was put on the site's store with a release date before Mike even contacted Ed to get them made. I asked Mike why that was, and he responded that it takes 2 weeks to make DVDs. I pointed out that they could get them done earlier than that release date, and that still doesn't make any sense. And it devolves into him shouting 2 weeks at me nonsensically. So yeah, stuff going up. Someone who's doing a job not being told the job that they need to be doing. So if they wanted to have DVDs out, here's the thing I don't understand at all. I could understand putting up like pre-orders, or like asking for pre-orders so you could get an idea of how many DVDs you need to make. But to say the release date for this thing is going to be at this time, and you guys haven't even made the plans to have the DVDs made, is really stupid. These things make me mad, and I had nothing to do with anything that was going on. I was just watching Channel Awesome. This would drive me nuts. I would have very little tolerance for anything that was going on there. They put out a letter saying they're not doing the anniversary specials anymore because of the weather. Everybody knows it's because it's time consuming and expensive. And they feel like they were just lied to for absolutely no reason. Let's see. This is the site. Let me see if I can find it. They've never once updated their internal site in 10 years. To this day, it's an Icky Sports Joomla template Bar Fiesta and Blistered Thumbs are still on the scheduling drop downs. Let's see here. They get into here's what I was looking for. When Mike is looking for a site designer, the first people he asks are the ones who designed the White House webpage. They quote him $50,000. So he goes with $100 template. I understand being on a budget. This is one of the big things that I wonder is how much money was going through Channel Awesome. Because I could understand if you were on a budget that you would just use a WordPress site and with $100 template. I could see that. But that's if you're not making much money or any money. But if you're making a lot of money, and during this time frame, they were really popular, so they could have been making a lot of money. I don't know. See, that's one of the big factors that about this whole thing is like you just don't know how much money was being made, even though this was sort of the real big boom of video reviewers and having them all put together in this one site. Really should have drawn a lot of revenue, but unless we see numbers, and maybe there's a way to look that up, but if you see numbers, then that would put things in perspective a little bit better. Here they're asking for show descriptions. They even asked the producers at one point in time to make promos for their videos. So sort of hey, I'm so and so, and I'd like to talk about these things. Apparently they filmed them, but Channel Awesome never put them up on the site. And we're gonna skip through a lot of that. It's just more bad production. They get on to Allison about using more ads on her content. And they blame her for, at this point in time, the Nostalgia Critic is gone. They're trying to do demo reel. The site's tanking, and she's putting more ads on her videos. And when she was up in Chicago filming for something that they never actually released, apparently Mashad went up to her and told her that, her and Phalis, because they're putting more ads on their videos, that people are using ad block and no one's making any money anymore. Despite the fact that they killed off the Nostalgia Critic and nobody wanted to watch demo reel. Here's some stuff about Patreon. Some producers went to ask them if they could do Patreon. They looked at Patreon as basically e-begging. And then eventually they posted Brad's Patreon or a Patreon post or video or something. And when the producers went back to them, they finally said, yeah, you can use Patreon or we'll push your Patreon. Again, these are sort of arbitrary rules. They've got screen caps. Here's what's great about this document. If you really want to get into it, they've got screen caps. There's even a phone call, a recorded message. Let's get into Mars Girl. Yeah, this is where she's talking about giving Mike Mashad the videos, so they would take them and upload them to Blip, and they would make the money, and then they would give her her cut. She never saw that cut, so that's what she's talking about there. Mistitling videos. I could see this being irritating, especially if that's what you're doing is making videos, but essentially she had the title was Animation, a Children's Medium. She was describing the video to Mike Mashad being something like a history of animation. So instead of going with the title that she had chosen, he called it, the history of animation, which it really wasn't. So that was a basically just not paying attention to the producer. Perceived rivalry with Screw Attack. Now, what some people don't know is that Mars Girl for a while was living in Texas. I think she lives in California now, and I actually got to meet her at Allcon one year. Screw Attack at this time, Screw Attack is also Texas-based, and for a while they were doing a convention that was in Dallas, Fort Worth. She knew some of the guys at Screw Attack. I think Spoonie knew some guys at Screw Attack. And they wanted to go, and apparently Channel Awesome, who, again, keep in mind, these guys just post their content to Channel Awesome. Other than that, they really don't have that much communication with them, apparently. And but they got essentially sort of, I wouldn't say in trouble, but they were sort of not looked favorably upon because they wanted to go to the Screw Attack convention. And Channel Awesome looked at them as rivals, that their team was going to go work for them. Costumes for the anniversary. They were expected to make costumes. They were told that they were going to be reimbursed. But when they did that, the Channel Awesome team wanted to keep Channel Awesome, the website, wanted to keep the costumes that they had made. So essentially, they were just willing to pay for the raw materials, and any work that somebody went in to actually make the costume, they're not willing to pay them for the labor, just the raw materials that they purchased, which I thought was, again, shady. Just not very. I don't know. It just sounds like somebody who's really, really cheap. More stuff on the death of the Nostalgia Critic. Forgotten during filming. She's actually talked about that quite a bit, where she was supposed to be in a scene. They called everybody who was supposed to be there except for her, and she was in the next scene with a speaking line, and they just decided to plop her in, despite the fact that they filmed without her, and just call it a plot hole. More mislabeled videos. Mars Girl, I think, got off a little. I mean, it's still miserable. Don't get me wrong. Probably got off lighter than a lot of other people. So we're gonna go through this. Holly Brown, admin or HR or both. So I'm gonna go through this because I find Holly's story a bit more interesting because we didn't really see much of Holly. I think she was in some shots of various videos, but she was mostly a behind-the-scenes personality, trying to be the glue. And it sounds like for a while she was as much of the glue as the company would allow. So here's from Holly Brown. I was HR for the company. They barely listened to me 5% of the time, maybe. That's probably generous. In general, only when production was falling behind on an anniversary and they needed advice from someone who actually got a degree in directing and stage management. Mike Michaud is not the sole owner of Channel Awesome, but does own the Nostalgia Critic intellectual property. He is, last I knew, the majority shareholder. Doug and Rob did not know him until he, Mike Ellis, and Bargo approached them to make the site, and they liked having someone else in charge. Mike Ellis was the one who originally built the site. I believe he did site updates. He did most of the day-to-day operations. None of us had a clue what Mike Michaud did. This is something that you're going to hear a lot of. In fact, what you hear mostly is that Mike Michaud pretty much just played Xbox and didn't really want to speak to people, didn't really want to do anything. And even though he's the majority shareholder, he doesn't really work within the operation of the company. I can verify even people who think they're cool in the eyes of management have had shit talked about them. Let's see. They never understood social media. They were happy with their little corner of the internet. That's why at Punkyvale ran the official Twitter for so long. They didn't think we needed social. Even looking now, you can see they don't get it. This is something really big, and this is something that I myself struggle with. I know I need a better social media presence, but yeah, if you're trying to put a company together, you do need to have someone who actually knows what's going on with the social media side of things. It's really important. I was not informed of everything that went on despite being a part of management. For instance, I was never in a CA Premium or had no idea what it was. Channel Awesome Premium. I don't remember that. That sounds like something they would do, though, is offer like a premium Channel Awesome, maybe release videos to people who subscribed to that earlier. I don't know. Rules were not enforced equally for everyone. There is one person still on the site who doesn't post for months, but they didn't want to drop, despite the minimum video per month requirement. Yeah, I'm getting a little punchy here, so bear with me. The site lost a bunch of stuff in 2010 or 2011 because it only existed on a single drive. Yeah, looking at all of these mistakes are things that could be easily fixed, and really all it is just taking a second to think about, hey, what if something goes wrong? Here we go. Getting to Mike Ellis. I didn't know who this dude was, and he sounds like a complete dirtbag. Mike Ellis was upset that I would not pursue a relationship with him. He was married. And that I brought certain severe mismanagement, legal boundary here, to light. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm reading this poorly. Okay, Mike Ellis was upset that I would not pursue a relationship with him, and that I thought that certain severe mismanagement. And I brought certain severe mismanagement to light. In a previous meeting, there was nearly a fistfight between him and Mashad. I'm sad that I probably threw away the handwritten notes that were taken when Ellis was threatening to fire me. There were some real gems in there. So Mike Ellis eventually does get fired. And when they do, they put Holly in a safe house because they're worried that Mike Ellis is going to go fly off the chain and go after her. And she's with a group of guys with baseball bats and a sword. And she doesn't remember who had the sword, but she thinks it might be Rob or Doug. Or she says, I want to say Doug. So obviously this Mike Ellis dude is unhinged. And he was one of the heads of Channel Awesome. And she's getting into how she kind of helped out with Suburban Nights, things like that. That was one of the big ones for me that Mike Ellis went after him, but Mike Ellis went after someone else as well. Okay. And here's the big thing. I'm going to try to sum this up because this is pretty long. So Holly spent a lot of time working for Channel Awesome. And she was pretty much on call 24 hours a day. And she had to get some surgery done. And they decided to fire her the day after she got her surgery because she wasn't available. And it was just really a dirtbag move. And I've heard different things. Again, this is just hearsay. I'm not sure. But I heard like Doug was involved with the firing somehow. Okay, here she goes. I was not provided with a reason why I was let go. They didn't need to because Illinois was an at-will state. I think they had been preparing for it for a while because we had just signed contracts for the first time only a month or so prior. I assume letting me have the surgery was a gift, but I would have liked to have had a day to recover first. They had me sign another contract after I was fired because because if I didn't sign, I wouldn't receive my severance pay. The contract would bar me from working in the industry for 3 years. I could not be paid to consult, run a site, anything. My involvement with Nerdvice or Circle Plus couldn't make me money. I guess those were things that she tried to work on afterwards. I was scared of pursuing anything legal against them because I was chronically ill, unemployed, and they had recently accumulated 90K after their Indiegogo campaign. Doug was the deciding vote on me being employed. So yeah, it was the Nostalgia Critic. My life was ruined. I lost all my friends. I had to leave Chicago. I didn't have a job, nor could I get one if you Googled me. It was rough for several years. I've really worked hard to make things better for myself, and I've been published on the Mary Sue and was a guest on BBC NewsHour. So yeah, this just sounds amazingly stupid. Linkara's story is pretty much, he thought, like, he wasn't aware of a lot of stuff that was going on, but eventually when he found out what was happening, he really wanted to try to fix Channel Awesome from the inside. So that's a lot of Linkara's story. Another one is, once the Channel Awesome had acquired the Chicago studio, Linkara actually had done a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo for his own movie, and he was going to have a lot of Channel Awesome producers in it. And he went to Mashad and asked if he could use the studio, since 90% of it's not being used anyway. So Mashad came up with a couple of crap answers, essentially that Linkara would have to have a chaperone, like he hadn't been with Channel Awesome almost near the beginning. He'd have to get insurance, which is pretty normal if you're going to rent a space out. But basically he was treating him like he was some dude off the street, not Linkara, who had been with Channel Awesome for 8 years, 9 years, somewhere around there. He was also made to... he was working as a moderator for Channel Awesome as well. So on top of doing videos, and I think I need to kind of state, especially with someone like Linkara, the amount of effort that he puts into his videos. And you can tell by his work ethic. The dude's got so many videos out. He puts a lot of effort and time into his videos, and instead of Channel Awesome paying somebody to be a moderator or manage the site, because apparently Mike Ellis was the guy who was doing that, they decided to give that functionality over to other producers, and for a while it was FilmBrain and Linkara who were mods for the site. I could imagine that would take up a lot of time, because you have to sort of be available during peak hours. This on top of trying to film and edit your videos and whatever special effects or anything that you're adding into it, along with writing your script and acting it out and doing multiple takes. That's a lot of work, and these guys were basically moderating the site for free. And take a little bit of a break here, catch up. And the mass exodus. Okay, so here's sort of the list of people who were the first sort of mass exodus. Allison, of course, Phelan, Lindsay, Kyle, Andrew Dickman, Lindsay, Kyle, and Andrew left on their own, but Allison and Phelan, Allison was pretty much booted. Phelan left voluntarily because they were dating at the time, but they were both treated horribly. Phelan was doing special effects. I don't remember which one it was for, but he had done special effects for an anniversary before that. He didn't get paid for it. For this next anniversary, they told him that they would pay him for it. And for that particular anniversary, the producers, the content creators who were involved with making the anniversary special, acting in it, this time the contract wanted them to, again, any kind of team-up video that they did go directly to Channel Awesome so they could post it and make the money off of it instead of the producers. They had an argument about that, and eventually they came up to the conclusion that they could make 2 videos, one that would go to Channel Awesome and one that the creators could keep. The reason why they were citing needing to have those videos was to pay for the special effects. But Phelan was doing the special effects. So essentially, Phelan was paying for himself twice. Because he was volunteering to do it, which was taking time away from him making his own videos. And then they wanted him to make a team-up video with someone to give to them so they could make money off of it. And none of them would see the money from the DVDs. So this was just sort of, it's just, yeah, it's incredible. There's a lot of greed and a lot of just not thinking things through. And it's really amazing to see what they were doing. But you know what? I think that's going to do it, because I this thing bums me out. It really does. This is not the way I really wanted to end it. I want to be like, hey, yeah, this is awesome. Talk about things. But going through this again, because I read this the other night, and I remember just feeling kind of drained, and going back over it again and talking about the events really does drain you. You start to feel really bad for these people. So I think that's going to do it for the document itself, because it's basically a lot of the same thing. Incompetence in filmmaking, not thinking things through. You know, them trying to make money hand over fist at the cost of some of the producers. It's just a ton of that stuff. So I did want to bring this up. This is the apology letter that came out soon afterwards. And this is what Channel Awesome had to say from this 69-page document. We wanted to take a moment to clear the air and acknowledge some of the recent public concerns raised by content creators previously associated with Channel Awesome. Channel Awesome is an organization that respects our producer partners and strives to create the best possible environment for everyone. We welcome a diverse community of people joining together to create great videos. For the people who have spoken about the past instances, for the people who have spoken out about past instances they deemed hurtful or unprofessional, we sincerely regret you feel that way. Our priority has always been to help content partners succeed and provide people a vehicle to follow their dreams. When the need arose, we have distanced ourselves from people who were particularly callous, letting go of significant stakeholders in the interest of keeping our mission at the forefront. We appreciate and hear frustrations. Good grief, what's going on here? We appreciate and hear the frustration of past producers. We're actively taking internal steps to better improve communication with our producers so they can be focused on putting out their great content. And we're open to constructive criticism, the kind that can help us become even better and serve the needs of our community. But criticism that isn't a means to a productive end does little for either the party criticizing or those in the line of fire. Our focus now is to move on, or our focus now is on moving forward with the wonderful team we have and all our dedicated followers. We want to make our collective future the best it can possibly be. We thank our content creators, team, and fans for truly making our channel awesome. Here's to creating something even better in the future. So this apology is not an apology. It's basically, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but it's not like, hey, we're going to take responsibility for that. So what has all of this caused? What has all of this ended up doing? Well, I decided to pull up Channel Awesome's Social Blade, and let's look at the numbers. So Monday on the 2nd is when it dropped. So they lost 643 subs. You can see that number grow. By Wednesday, this thing had really gotten some traction. By Thursday, they had dropped again. And Friday, oh, dude, they've lost 7,606 subs. Go to that live. Watch that number plummet. Yeah. So, yeah, this has hurt Channel Awesome. What would I like to see happen, or what is going to happen? I don't know, but here's some ideas. I think the large part of the issue that everybody's been having is with Mike Mashad. Now, Mashad he owns the lion's share of the company, and he seems to be the most toxic of the people who are involved there. Now, because he owns the Nostalgia Critic IP, I see this being a problem for Doug and Rob. They've tried to do something else. They've tried to do stuff like demo reel, and it hasn't taken. And I think at this point in time, I think it's time for Doug and Rob to maybe split from Channel Awesome, but I can see that being a very difficult decision, and maybe something they don't want to do because of the Nostalgia Critic basically belonging to Mashad. But this does seem to be the biggest of the issue, being that the channel is just, at least then, wasn't run very well. What I would like to see, coming from someone who, doesn't know any of the internal workings of the site or anything like that, is what the current producers feel about Channel Awesome. Is this something that they still feel, are these still the same issues that these past producers were running into? Or have things improved? Has somebody stepped up and actually, had communication with the producers? Do they actually get to talk with someone who seems to care about what they're doing? But who knows? It's going to be interesting to watch Channel Awesome. A comment that I saw earlier today was someone saying that this is probably going to destroy Channel Awesome. I don't know if it will. I really don't. You've had other YouTube dramas happen, and you see a large drop in subs, and then eventually it sort of tapers out, or evens out and plateaus, and then it starts increasing again. And people very easily and very quickly forget about sort of the mishandling or the mistakes of some of these channels. But I think the age of what we used to enjoy as Channel Awesome, where you had a bunch of content creators coming together into one spot, I don't know if that's a thing anymore. We've watched a lot of the content creators who were around, may not even have been with Channel Awesome, but were around at the time. They've evolved their format as well. So Pat the NES Punk, he very rarely does Pat the NES Punk episodes. He mostly does his podcasts. If you look at the AVGN, he very rarely does nerd videos anymore. He's mostly on as himself, talking about other things that he likes. He's used the nerd persona to launch himself into a decent career and been able to make a movie and do what he wanted to. And he's been able to kind of start to distance himself away from the character, because that's not a lot of the way a lot of people review things anymore. Most people are being themselves. A character like the Nostalgia Critic is kind of starting to become old hat. And it may be time for the Nostalgia Critic to actually die this time instead of... And I don't mean kill anybody. I'm talking about the character. That maybe Doug and Rob need to walk away from Channel Awesome and walk away from the Nostalgia Critic and see if they can start making content on their own and distance themselves away from Channel Awesome. Again, most of these complaints are against Mike Michaud. And I'm not saying that the Walkers are not to blame for some of the stuff, or at least, turning away when something was going on. But, it's I'm kind of anxious to see what comes up next and see what happens. The apology letter that was written, I think, did more damage. I think that's doing more of this than what the document is doing, because that letter kind of proves the point. The way it was handled really shows how Channel Awesome, or at least some of the higher ups at Channel Awesome, really think about what happened with their producers. So I think that's going to do it for me tonight. Yosh, thanks for jumping in and watching, and I'll see you guys later.